Hello viewers, thank you very much for watching GIBS TV. Today's video will be looking at the passages of the theoretical framework discussion. Specifically, we will be looking at the theoretical framework and the literature review. That is the relationship between the two. The theoretical framework and the literature review, the main difference that exists between these two concepts is their function, but the other criteria that scholars have utilized to differentiate between these two major concepts, the literature review and that of the theoretical framework. The literature review explores what has already been written about the topic and the study in order to highlight a gap, whereas the theoretical framework is a conceptual and analytical approach the researcher is going to take to fill that gap. Literature review and the theoretical framework are two indispensable components of research. Both are equally important for the foundation of a given research. Difference between the theoretical framework and literature review. There are four criteria that have been utilized by scholars to differentiate between literature review and theoretical framework. And they include definition, nature, function, and style. Talking about definition criteria. Here, literature review is a critical evaluation of the existing published work in a selected area, while that of the theoretical framework is a component in research that introduces and describes theory behind the research problem. The second criteria is the nature. For the case of nature, the literature review explores what has already been written about the topic and the investigation in order to highlight a gap, while that of the theoretical framework is a conceptual and analytical approach the researcher is going to take to fill that gap. For the case of function, the literature review explores what has already been written about the topic and the study in order to highlight a gap, while the theoretical framework is the conceptual and analytical approach the researcher is going to take to fill that gap. The last criteria is the style. For the case of the style, literature review is backward-looking, while that of the theoretical framework is forward-looking. When we recall the argument about a concept map in the previous video, you will appreciate the bigger difference between that of the theoretical framework and the literature review and their respective relationship as well. If you recall, we realized that a concept map offers you a tool to draw a plan for how you will approach your investigation within a specific theoretical framework. First, review your literature and organize key issues of interest related to your topic using headers with key authors noted below each issue or theme or subheadings or headings. These are the foundational concepts that support your chosen theory and its related concept or major concept. Next, arrange your idea in a hierarchical, logical structure to create a floor plan or foundation for your house or dissertation writing. So in this case, we treat dissertation as your building, your house. So the literature review and that of the theoretical framework are going to serve as the logical structure for the entire plan floor or the foundation for the building. So it's going to serve as a foundation for the entire study. In reviewing literature review, you need to exhaust all knowledge around the concept that you're explaining. Sometimes when you're writing literature review, it can take between 40 pages and over. A good literature review for a dissertation should not be less than 40 pages. But for a thesis, if it's about 30 to 35 pages literature review, that is also a good start. Start with the general ideas and funnel your thinking down to more specific related topics that connect to your research question and study variables. Each idea should have a clear purpose and significance in relation to the topic as a whole. That is why some institutions prefer for students to caption the literature session as review of related literature or review of relevant literature instead of literature review, because they want students to review only relevant literature that is associated with the topic. They don't want them to bring in any information or material that are not related to the topic. So most of the institutions, they prefer student captioning the literature session as review of related literature or review of relevant literature instead of just making a general literature review or review of literature. We need to narrow the thinking down so that at least students will focus on only related literature or relevant literature to the topic. By clearly establishing the link and alignment for both the theoretical framework and the literature, the reader should be able to begin to see a clear picture of your ideas by previewing the organization and identification of your headings. Where do ideas flow? What are the linkages from each concept to the next? Which concepts are most likely aligned or from the literature on your chosen theory? And draw visual arrows, connectors, and boxes among concepts to form your conceptual framework that helps you to establish the relationship between the concept and the variables, and the variable that will be utilized in the modeling. Finally, frame out the entire map with your theoretical framework and your research question. How literature review is rooted in theory. Note that with the help of the concept map, it will enable you to write the literature review in an organized manner that is aligned with the theoretical framework. Meanwhile, note that the following items will be included in a strong dissertation literature review rooted in theory. 1, a brief statement of your topic, introduction to your organization of the literature review, identification of your chosen theoretical framework that defines the theory, identify key theorists, and history of the theory. 4, the specification of key theoretical principles to be applied to your topic that organize around conceptual subheadings. That's the themes that you're going to use to build the entire framework and that of the literature review session. 5, identification of the conflict and controversies in the literature also helps you to organize the thought and identify the literature gap. Identification of the gap in the existing literature is also very important because it's going to help to inform the entire study, the topic, because that builds around the research idea. It's very important because without literature gap, there is no study. In the last paragraph only, an explanation of how your proposed study connects to existing literature is very important because you are concluding the entire summary of how your study going to situate into the body of literature. So it's very important to do that. In conclusion, a holistic view of you developing a concept map will allow you to view concepts that may or may not fit well with your theoretical framework. So it's very important to have a concept mapping so that at least you know how your study fits into the body of literature. And then also align with that of the theoretical framework. That is, what aspect of your research question have not yet been addressed on your map? Because once you do concept mapping, it will enable you to know the aspect of the theoretical framework that has been addressed by other researchers, and that needs to be addressed by you as well. What connections are weak or need additional details? Concept map will help you to determine that. And does the theoretical model, the exterior elevation blueprint, fit well with the drawing's interior blueprint as you imagine it? Your dissertation committee, know that your dissertation committee can help you evaluate the feasibility of the plan and approach for the dissertation. Thank you very much for subscribing to GIBS TV. I will see you all in the